Alright, so I'm finally going to be talking about probably one of the most memorable or well-known, I think, bosses in gaming history almost. People did a top 10 of kind of bosses that they remember from games, at least like visually and maybe just the general feel around them. I would say that this one from Earthbound, Giygas, is one of the most memorable ones. Just for its disturbing visage, I guess you could say, its disturbing imagery that happens, its strange form, and its things that it says and such, like, throughout the fight. And just, in general, the things that happen throughout the fight and how you actually beat it. I already showed all the stuff pretty much leading up to Giygas, so I don't really have much to introduce, basically. Like, you get through the Cave of Time, and then you basically go through this hallway and begin the fight with Giygas, essentially. I'm going to show you the clips or whatever, the entire video footage of all the stuff that I think matters or whatever that can be interpreted from this. And as usual, I'll get back, do a full my analysis on that part. So I'll see you then. first thing I want to mention, before, when I mentioned the Nightmare Rock, which was actually, in Japanese was more the Nightmare Boulder, is apparently, at least what this other person kind of thought about it, interpreted. They were saying, like, maybe a Nightmare Boulder was this thing that you're looking at on the screen right now. Like, whatever that they're going into, this lair of this creature Giygas, this entity Giygas. Because it looks like a rocky formation. It's also strange that it has kind of the shape, I guess you could say, of crystallized something. I forget, is it iron or like a ferrous metal or something that makes these kind of like square shaped crystals, or kind of weird. Yeah, like that kind of symbolizes fractals or something like that. But yeah, kind of weird. The main point being this thing, this lair, could be potentially interpreted as the Nightmare Boulder that Buzz talked about. I still think the Soundstone might have something to do with that, is Nightmare Rock. Nightmare Boulder, I could see that with this. But anyway, so you enter this place, and immediately it looks very, very strange. Nothing like this is seen in the game. I wouldn't say like a body horror kind of thing, but like more a biological kind of look. Definitely not something you would probably see in a game like this. Like more, it was a horizontal and I think vertical shooter called Life Force, where you're like actually entering into an alien creature, going through its body, and that's what the entire like game is going through this alien body and such. All this weird like gore, like you could say like gore, like bodily, biological weird stuff, not like body horror maybe, but like that kind of thing. But it's very strange being in a game like this, like a kid's game, seeing this kind of imagery, I guess you could say. So one, it looks very weird. Two, with the point that I'm trying to make is like, I'm sure that any of you watching would have looked at this and look what I showed without saying anything and could have made your own, like, what does that look like? Some people might say is that, oh, it looks like, I don't know, some kind of like intestines or something like that, like the intestinal tract, almost you're walking on top of it. And I think that is a fair interpretation one could make. But what I'm going for, and the point I'm going to be trying to make, is that this basically looks like the female reproductive system. And I think so many things kind of allude to that. This part that you're walking across, I could say, is probably the most likely thing. Is like you could even see is the opening that you go into, you know, it looks like a vagina or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it's just an opening like this. And is that these two pillars, whatever you want to call them, for this point, these would be the labia majora or whatever, like the labia themselves of the vagina, and this would be the vaginal opening. But now that I just thought about it, I never even considered that until this second. That looks like the, in New York, that looks like the towers or whatever. It kind of really, it could really look like the towers that are like twins or whatever. Yeah, I never considered that part until this second. That's pretty funny. But yeah, besides that weird crap there that I'm sure that they can make an interpretation with that. These rocks, these formation kind of looks like the labia majora, and this would be the vaginal opening itself. And you are entering this, and as you're going through this straightaway kind of walking section, I would say that as in this interpretation that you are walking through or across whatever the vaginal walls or whatever you want to call it, the vaginal opening or the vaginal track leading up to the end parts, whatever the other parts of the female reproductive tract, which when you get to this part is like, what in the hell is this? I think even if it's a stretch when I'm saying that this beginning part looks like the vaginal walls or whatever, like, I mean, it's dark too, like the vaginal walls or whatever, then you get to this thing, and it's like, what in the hell is this? And I think almost the first thought that would come to most people's mind if they've ever seen pictures of it would be, the reproductive tract. Like, this looks like the uterus, or it looks like all the parts of it, like the uterus and such. Like, almost this thing itself, whatever the heck this thing is that's, like, pulsating, that can almost be seen as the vagina as well. Like, it looks like a vagina. It even has, like, a pixel slit or whatever, like an opening. It's so weird. But then the even more important parts, like these tubular things that look like, I would say, like the fallopian tubes. And I'm not saying that this looks like 1-to-1 like the female reproductive system, but I think someone could be like, that looks pretty similar to that picture or whatever. Like, I could see that. Like, the back part here would be like the fallopian tubes. You know, maybe one of these things could be like an ovary or something like that. The back itself can be like the uterus itself, the uterine walls. And then this circular thing in the middle is clearly the cervix, the cervical opening, or whatever you want to say. You know, where the birth canal would be, like the baby would actually, their head would crown when they are breaching, whatever the term is, going through the birthing process. And just the pulsating nature and stuff, like just all of the biological looking stuff here, like to me, completely represents the female reproductive system. And everything's pulsating, like obviously biological in nature. And then when you actually approach it, in the thing that I was saying is the cervix, you have the head of a baby or whatever, of a person, the head of something crowning and coming out of this cervix, this birth canal, being almost being like birthed, whatever you want to say. It happens to be Ness's face, which is really interesting, besides in the corner, like the creepy factor, I guess you could say, but it's like Ness looking into a mirror, pretty much, like the reflection of himself. Just the reflection of so many things I've been talking about in this game, but this is especially like you were literally seeing yourself, or Ness is seeing himself in this birthing process here going on or whatever. Then Pokey shows himself that he is working directly with Giygas. What he says, the Apple of Enlightenment has already made a prediction, but I won't let what the Apple of Enlightenment predicted take place. You guys will be beaten by Giygas. Giygas will be stronger, a more powerful entity than any other. Why? 'Cause of me. I was led by Giygas, and now I am here. The Apple of Enlightenment couldn't predict this. Which, once again, is, even if you just look at it like base level, very ironic that Pokey is saying this. Just like in some earlier parts where it's like saying that you are going to break the destiny or break fate or break this predictions or whatever, but at the same time most likely being the actual reason you doing this, you are following you are following the destiny, the fate by doing this. Like if Pokey never came to help Giygas, he likely would have never lost, because you'll see in the fight that Giygas in this form currently as the reflection of Ness, he is copying all of Ness's abilities, which is not really that much. He's literally just using your attack PSI ability, Rockin' or whatever you call it. And you cannot even attack or really damage Giygas in this form. So the only person you could actually damage is Pokey. He's the only one you can actually, like, really fight. So the way that you defeat this phase, say, like, I'm saying, hypothetically, if you, in this form, actually fought Giygas, you would have no way to win without Pokey, because the only reason that Giygas gets into his more vulnerable state is by Pokey turning off what is termed, I guess, the Devil's Machine. If he didn't turn it off, he wouldn't have never lost control of his conscious or whatever, his mind, Giygas, and you wouldn't have any way to deal with him at all. So what I'm trying to say is the irony, and that Pokey is saying he is going to change destiny, change fate. He's going to, the Apple of Enlightenment is going to not be predicted, like he's going to change that. But in reality, him doing what he is doing is the reason that Giygas is defeated. He is one of the main reasons. If he was not there, Giygas would probably have not been defeated here, because him shutting off the Devil's Machine like he does is what causes Giygas to go into his more vulnerable, I guess more insane state where you're able to defeat him. Master Giygas, no. Giygas is no longer the wielder of evil. He has become the embodiment of evil itself, which is strange. It's like, throughout the game, Giygas supposedly has been the cause of all the people kind of like, what evil? You know, it's kind of, I'm having trouble kind of putting words to it, but it is strange. Like, he was putting out these many statues that were supposedly bringing out the evil in people to cause them to do, like, horrible things and such, and bring out the inner evil within them, and coax that out. But that would kind of mean like, well, he's the wielder of that, but almost he would be the embodiment as well. So yeah, kind of weird. Maybe it's just like flowery kind of ways to put it. Definitely weird. Which he cannot control on his own. He is the evil power. He says he cannot control on his own. So that's why he supposedly has this devil's machine keeping it under control. And as I said during this fight, the only way you are supposed to get past this part is to actually only damage Pokey. And eventually he gets fed up and he shuts off the devil's machine, which causes Giygas. Well, it is a gazillion years too early for you to oppose Giygas. Pretty stupid to keep fighting without even knowing what Giygas looks like. You were to ever see Giygas, you'd be so petrified with fear, you'd never be able to run away. That's how scary it is. So you want me to turn off the devil's machine? Well, prepare to be amazed. And he mentions you don't even know what it looks like. It's interesting because that's almost like it's saying that this is like kind of an illusion in a way, but it's once again just like in Magican, I guess, where Ness is fighting his inner evil in the form of that Manny statue, whatever. In this, you are seeing, Ness is seeing the reflection of himself, Giygas, like his face. He's seeing the literal reflection of himself. But Pokey is saying that, yeah, under that, you are not seeing even the true form of him, which he will shut off the devil's machine and he will show the true form of Giygas, this like horrible kind of weird face sort of thing, like weird monster. That is like seeing the outside of the visual, I guess you could say, outside of that perspective, seeing past the surface level thing of just seeing Ness himself. But then when the machine is shut off, the inhibitor or whatever, he's able to see the true evil within himself or something like that, the true nature. When Pokey says, like, what he says about this, isn't this terrifying? I'm terrified too. Giygas cannot think rationally anymore, and he isn't even aware of what he is doing now. His own mind was destroyed by his incredible power. What an almighty idiot. Yep, that's what he is. And you will be just another meal to him. Basically, what he's kind of saying is that shutting off the devil's machine almost kind of shut off his connection or whatever to like his mind, whatever, his consciousness in a way. So now this is like going by the psychology, the id, the animal side of the animalistic side, his nature or whatever of this entity. And I'm not sure what to personally kind of interpret from Giygas is like initial look, where it's just like, even, just for like the Super Nintendo, it's a very disturbing kind of image, like, obviously some kind of screaming face almost, or like just some kind of weird, almost like eldritch, but also human kind of monster kind of look to it. It just looks very disturbing and unsettling. Just like some kind of a screaming, agonized face monster thing swirling around in this weird kind of blackness. Some just monster. Just kind of like undulating in the background or whatever. It's very strange, even in its first thing, which makes this an extremely memorable boss. Obviously, an extremely memorable thing in just gaming in general. And just like in Mother 1, every time Giygas does an attack, it says you cannot grasp the true form of Giygas' attack. And also every time he attacks in this new form, whatever it is, in his true form, he says something, which is generally him just saying the player not the player character's name, in this case, Ness. And eventually Pokey comes back, he appears back, and progresses the fight, I guess, for the only force fighting for justice. And here you stand, waiting to be burned up with the rest of the garbage of the universe. And then he basically says, what you need to do you have to use Paula's prey ability to progress through the next parts of the fight. And then when he goes off stage, then Giygas goes into his next form, which you can't actually beat Giygas by doing you couldn't fight. I'm pretty sure his health just gets, every time you hit him, basically just gets reset to his max or whatever every time. So you can't actually beat him in this form. You have to use Paula's prey like it is. And his form gets more disturbing as the game goes on, or as the fight goes on. But the first thing that happens when you pray, Paula prayed from the bottom of her heart. And interestingly, the first people she is able to contact with this praying, Dr.Andonuts and Apple Kid and the Mr.Saturns back in Saturn Valley, her telepathically praying there, not even telepathically, I guess just praying, is able to basically rouse all them to do something they've never done before, I guess, which is pray for something, the Mr. Saturns. Now, through this entire sequence of the praying and everything, it is extremely strange, just as I talked about in the last episode, that somehow, through time, through what time is, through time, they are able to communicate, or at least in the last video, their souls are able to go back to their bodies through time, unassisted, unabated by any technology or whatever. Paula is able to pray, and I don't know what you'd say is like telepathically, whatever, but just this action, she's able to send this frequency, this energy, this communication out, and is able to basically instantaneously arrive at these, the people on the Earth or whatever, the destination back before they traveled back in time. So, yeah, what the heck does that say, if you ask me? Like, just this frequency, this energy she's putting out is able to travel through time and arrive at these people that are in the time. Like, if you want to go by the Back of the Future thing, what it looks like almost is that they literally just had them teleport back in time, and then they got back to Saturn Valley, and then instantly, like, retrocausality almost, like, almost exactly what that is. Like, a retrocausality is they are back in some other time, apparently, some other thing, and they are able to communicate back instantly, basically, with these people that are back in the present time. Well, what does that say? Like, to me, just more of the fact that time does not really exist, or time doesn't exist at all, or time is a construct. Reality, it just flows, and all these things can just flow, these energies and everything through it like nothing, like a liquid. It just goes through it. There's no thing restricting it. And that's what I would kind of see as the idea of the retrocausality stuff, is that these communications, these synchronicities, whatever, these things are just kind of communicated through this fake idea of time or whatever, this false idea of time, and is able to just go through it like nothing. From what I'm seeing here in this whole sequence is exactly what is happening there. And she's, consciously doing that with transmitting telepathically her communication to these other beings. So this part that has been talked about very often in this community, whatever. Well, it's been talked about within the Earthbound community and such, because it's a very interesting thing. So when you pray when you first do the first prayer to the Mr. Saturns, Giygas' as it says, his defenses become unstable, and then the background, or his form, changes visually to this, what you're seeing on screen now, which is like this rapidly kind of like pulsating sort of thing. And I think you can see on screen right now pretty fucking clearly the shape that it makes is, I would say at the very least, very familiar. That, for almost any person that has ever seen any kind of pictures of like the reproductive process and like systems and a fetus and babies and such, this shape that Giygas goes into looks exactly like a fetus or some kind of baby in a kind of like sort of fetal position, as you'd see them almost in like, those scans of the uterus and stuff, like what a fetus or a baby, a fully developed fetus baby would look like. The thing is, like, if this was just a thing that sort of was pulsating and undulating, and it just kind of like, for a frame, it just flashed on there, I might be able to be like, oh, well, maybe, I still wouldn't probably say it was coincidence, because I don't really believe those anymore, but one could maybe say like, oh, you're reading too much into it. But in this case, it's throughout the entire background, it is this image, basically, like repeating this image. And it doesn't change. Like throughout the entire thing, you can see this shape clearly. And I think there is like an insane amount of things that could be interpreted from this. Probably some of the most things that could be interpreted from this, at least boss, this Giygas entity, what it is from this. And so many in the gaming community that doesn't see the kind of stuff that we do, they would automatically dismiss this and say, yeah, it's just a coincidence. But it is weird. It is a coincidence, though. That it's just, it just happens to be there. There's no point of doing this, but let me think through this and say, like, this game had to go through a sort of quality assurance system with Nintendo and such. This was released for the wide general market, both Japan, America, and eventually other parts of the world and everything. All parts of the world. This got advertised, and this wasn't some small game. So this had to go through some kind of QA team. Imagine if you were a QA team, what would be one of the things you'd probably do? You'd probably go through the final boss at least and look through some of this stuff. Would you see something like this? This is not subtle at all. I'm not saying that somebody did this on purpose, but I'm saying this image is not subtle at all of what it is. Like, you could look at this, and if you've ever seen a baby or anything like a picture of a fetus at all, you could almost immediately see this and see like, oh, that looks like a fetus. That looks like a baby. Do you think a QA person would not look at this, see that, and say, maybe we should change that so it doesn't look so similar to like a baby or something? Like, it seems a little bit, people might be able to interpret or assume things from that. So you think that they would remove that, but they didn't. Even if they say it wasn't intentional, which it probably wasn't. Like, I believe the whole thing just kind of flows. Like, somehow this shape came there, the shape was there, and it just got ignored or whatever. It was like, okay, just, put it through, it's fine. Yeah, I just see that, and I see it as being almost impossible that it is impossible. As far as I'm saying, it is impossible. This is not a coincidence that it is showing this shape appears, and it's extremely obvious of what it is. So, what can be interpreted from this? Well, people actually have interpreted from this, even if they say it is coincidence. The theory that they're actually, like, aborting Giygas. Like, this is Giygas in this form. This is Giygas as, like, being created or being born or something like that. And you are going into the female reproductive tract of this entity, this creature or whatever. Oh, one could say even maybe this kind of godly thing, and aborting it before it is born or something like that. So, hey, that's one thing. Could be fair enough. But I'm going to give a slightly different interpretation of this. Could be completely insane, but it's just kind of what I thought about that made me think of this. And that is maybe, what I would say is that since we've seen these symbols of like birth and life, the creation of life, the visuals of the female reproductive tract at the beginning, and then you get to this, where it's showing, like, Giygas kind of in this form of, like, a shape of a baby or a fetus or whatever. I would just see this as, like, obvious symbolism of kind of that maybe the whole process of life, rebirth, the forming of life, birth and everything like that. Maybe some could interpret that as this is what is happening with Giygas in some way, that he is going through kind of the stages of that early life or something. Like, you see Ness, and then you're going backward almost. Almost like a rebirth or being reborn or something like that is just... And one could also say that maybe Giygas is kind of an entity that is creating life, almost. Like, Giygas isn't just being born, or maybe... Like, maybe Giygas is another way of saying Gaia or something, like Gaia, the god of life or the goddess of life. And I wanted to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it in another thing. One of these people in a random place in Threed kind of alludes to Giygas, and he mentions something like he's not sure if Giygas is a female or a male or something like that. And it kind of makes me think like, okay, that's very interesting. Is that the confusion or whatever you want to say? Yeah, confusion of the genders with this entity. Like, it's obviously supposed to be kind of representing some kind of like godlike being in a way. And most godlike beings, even though they kind of have a gender represented, it also is interesting, like, yeah, I mean, if you're the creator of life, you probably won't really have some kind of prescribed, like, you're a male or a female, whatever. Interesting there, like, Gaia was a female represented as one, birth and everything, just really strange stuff, I would say. And, yeah, it's just... I don't have one interpretation of this. It's just really, really strange. Not a coincidence at all. Obviously there for a reason. And it is something representing life, birth, rebirth, being reborn, something like that. Reincarnation, I don't know. Yeah, that's just what I see from this shape. But now, besides that, back to the whole praying thing. As I mentioned about what I think about the praying, it's very... at least for me, a very emotional kind of scene. It's obviously meant to be like that, but for me, it is pretty emotional. For a viewer that's never played the game, it might not be so much, but for me, it is very emotional. Just all these people that you have, known, all the characters in your party, all that they've known throughout their journey in their lives, praying for their safety and everything. And that directly damaging this entity Giygas or whatever, harming it. And then eventually doing enough praying, Giygas gets to this point where it's like, just the screen completely becomes like epileptic. Yeah, you still see the baby. You see even more baby shapes in here. Oh man, that's something I forgot to mention, but this is such a mess. But yeah, Giygas is saying stuff after this point where it's like really weird, unsettling kind of things, almost like pain and pleasure. And apparently, at least this is what the creator Shigesato Itoi gave for these lines, or what inspired him to write these lines, or whatever. He was in a movie theater, and he went into, when he was a kid, and he went into the wrong theater or something, like it was the wrong movie that was playing. It was the wrong one. It was like an adult movie, and he saw this scene. It wasn't a rape scene. Definitely it was a sexual, like, it wasn't as bad as people would describe it as if they actually see it, but clearly, supposedly, it like kind of traumatized him. It was like this lady in this black and white movie, I guess, like implied, obviously, this guy was having sex with her, but then after that, it's like pleasure and then pain, and then after that, he like stabs her or something like that. So the mixture of pleasure and pain, and that's what he said. That's the reason that Giygas is saying this stuff. I don't know what to interpret it, but it obviously makes it pretty memorable and strange for any person that have played this game and fought this boss, like just the stuff that it's saying. But once again, back to the whole praying thing, is that you get to a point where Giygas' defenses become unstable after all the praying. And it gets to this point where, at least the first time you try again with the praying, it says, Paula's call was absorbed by the darkness. Pretty creepy, ominous. So you're like, all right, one might think, should I keep praying? Is it gonna work? But then you do pray again. You get to this part where it actually does touch somebody. Paula and her friend's calls touch the heart of, and it just uses whatever name that you put in like twice in the game. Yeah, I put my name, Kirk. And it kind of like cuts out some of the letters to like, even though it would be pretty obvious, I think, if somebody put their name, like who it's saying. And then it finally goes to this person, pray for the kids, having never met them before. And then they keep praying, and eventually that is what finally defeats Giygas. But that's the interesting thing I want to mention, is it's interesting that the final person to really, I guess you could say, defeat Giygas, be the final person praying here that delivers the final blows to him, or it, is you, the player. Like, the actual player themselves is the one doing this. I look at that as having a lot of meaning to it, more so than just kind of putting you personally into the story or whatever, is that you are defeating this entity or whatever, this evil entity, supposedly, using positive energy and thought to defeat it. And that's, all the people that are praying, not just the player, but all the other people, they're putting their positive energy and thought to actually hurt, to damage whatever this entity and eventually defeat it. And I guess the fact that you, the player, are the one in the end who actually delivers the final blows, you're the one who in the end defeats it. It's saying that you are the one with all the power to defeat the evil, and especially just the evil within you, the evil in general, defeat all evil, because it's likely that you made that evil in the first place. You were the one who created the evil in the first place, so you were the only one who could really defeat it in the end. So that's what I see from the whole, you're the one delivering the final blows, praying. You are the final person, you are the final being that is, at the end, you were probably the being that created these evil things, and you are the one who defeats it in the end. You're the only one who has the power to do that. And then when Giygas is defeated, whatever happens here, just, just this horrible noise and distortion and everything, and then it shows that this whatever happens, Giygas being defeated destroys Ness and his friends' robot bodies, and their souls eventually go back to their original bodies, back the present time. But besides all that, Giygas is extremely interesting, I guess you could say, villain entity or whatever. Is like, there's so much that can be said from it and interpreted from it that it's kind of impossible. I can't even call Giygas evil per se, because it's like, I can't even like see like evil as necessarily a bad thing anymore. I'm kind of realizing like it's just kind of a part of us. But having to defeat this evil and such in the end is also an important thing to understand, I guess. Being able to conquer it, at least. One more thing I wanted to mention, probably pointless synchronicity, but after I defeated Giygas, in the actual time I was recording this footage, the original footage, as soon as I closed the emulator, after beating Giygas and getting to the prologue section, where you say goodbye to everybody, the time on my computer was, not even joking, exactly 3:33 p.m. At that exact time. I just closed it, and I looked at the clock, and I was like, whoa, what the heck? 3:33 p.m. yeah, I don't believe in coincidences, and the numbers always show up, but I look at that and I like smiled because I'm like, you know what? Me doing what I'm doing at that second there means that telling me that powerful number, whatever, 333, shows me that at least what I see, I'm doing something right and doing what I'm doing. I'm going down the right path doing that or whatever. So just a weird synchronicity, but pretty funny and interesting at the same time. But yeah. That's what I wanted to say about Giygas, my personal interpretations of all that I saw, and all I could really at this moment interpret from what I'd seen in that part of the game, that final encounter, that entity, and what it is, maybe what it's representing and such, what the meanings that can be derived from it. Hopefully, it is good enough to do that in the end. But once again, I will say the next videos, I'm going to be talking about most likely parts of the prologue, where you actually are able to just walk around freely after defeating Giygas. The game is already beaten and everything. Maybe some things some of the characters say afterward. Maybe a few other little things here and there. I'll be making a few more videos after this involving Earthbound, just on the kind of tying up loose ends and such, probably like stuff with credits and everything, those things. But this was a big one because Giygas is a very big character in the gaming media kind of sphere, whatever. He's very prominent in his being and everything. Just him existing is a very interesting thing to a lot of people. But yeah, besides all that, once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.